This injured horse was left to die. But what happened next will touch your heart. The night was unforgiving. Thunder growled like an angry beast, and the wind howled through the barren fields, carrying with it the sting of cold rain. Lightning slashed across the sky, illuminating the chaos below. A storm so fierce it seemed determined to swallow everything in its path. Amidst this ferocious turmoil, something stirred in the distance, barely visible against the raging tempest. It was a horse. Her coat, once a gleaming chestnut, was now matted with mud and blood, blending into the shadowy landscape. She stood trembling, her legs barely able to hold her weight. The gash on her side glistened in the fleeting flashes of lightning, a cruel testament to her suffering. Her eyes, wide with fear and desperation, darted around as if searching for a savior who wasn't coming. But her plight wasn't just the result of nature's fury. Someone had left her here, alone and broken, to face this merciless storm. A faint imprint of a halter mark around her muzzle hinted at a life she once had. A life of trust, perhaps of service, now cruelly discarded. Each step she attempted to take was met with searing pain. She stumbled and fell, the wet earth beneath her offering no comfort. The rain poured harder, soaking through her battered frame, and the wind seemed to mock her feeble cries for help. She was a ghost of her former self, fighting a battle that seemed already lost. Miles away, Elias sat by the window of his small, rustic farmhouse. The storm had stolen sleep from him, the howling wind refusing to let him rest. As he sipped his lukewarm tea, something unusual caught his eye, a shadow moving against the flashes of lightning. It wasn't uncommon to see deer or stray animals during storms, but this was different. This shadow wasn't moving freely. It was struggling. He grabbed his flashlight and coat, his instincts urging him to act. The storm roared its warning, but Elias had never been one to ignore his gut, especially when it came to animals. He stepped out, the icy rain lashing against his face as he trudged toward the fields. As he drew closer, his flashlight beam fell upon the horse. For a moment, Elias froze, his heart sinking at the sight. The animal was barely alive, her sides heaving with effort as she struggled to stand. He could see the terror in her eyes, the resignation of a creature that had long since given up hope. Elias knelt beside her, shielding her from the rain as best as he could. "Hey, girl," he murmured, his voice barely audible over the storm. "It's okay. I'm here now." The horse flinched at first, but something in Elias's voice, a softness, a promise, made her pause. For the first time that night, she stopped trembling, if only for a moment. Little did they both know. This was the beginning of a story that would touch the hearts of many. Elias was no stranger to storms, both the kind that raged outside and the ones that life threw his way. In his 50-odd years, he had weathered more than most: loss, heartbreak, and the daily grind of keeping his modest farm afloat. Yet, through it all, one thing remained constant: his unwavering love for animals. Living alone in a small farmhouse at the edge of town, Elias had built a quiet life surrounded by creatures that seemed to understand him better than most people ever could. His days were spent tending to his crops, mending fences, and caring for the assortment of animals that roamed his land. Chickens clucked lazily in their coop, goats nibbled on whatever they could find, and a pair of old sheepdogs, Max and Rosie, followed him everywhere. For Elias, animals weren't just companions, they were family. He had always believed that the bond between humans and animals was sacred, a trust that should never be broken. Perhaps it was this belief that made him so attuned to the faintest signs of distress, even in the dead of night. That evening, As the storm raged outside, Elias sat by his wood-burning stove, absently flipping through an old book. The rain pelted against the windows, and the wind howled like a mournful spirit. Max and Rosie lay curled at his feet, their ears twitching at every clap of thunder. It was a night meant for staying indoors, for seeking warmth and comfort against nature's wrath. But comfort was a luxury Elias rarely allowed himself. His mind drifted to the animals out there, strays seeking shelter, wild creatures struggling to survive. It was a thought that always gnawed at him during storms. He had seen too much cruelty in his time, abandoned pets left to fend for themselves, livestock treated as disposable. It was why he never hesitated to help, no matter the risk. As the clock struck midnight, Elias rose to refill his tea. That was when he saw it. A shadow moving in the fields beyond his barn. At first, he thought it was the wind playing tricks, but a second glance told him otherwise. Something was out there. Something alive. Curiosity turned to concern as he grabbed his flashlight and coat. Max and Rosie sprang to their feet, sensing his urgency. "Stay," Elias commanded, though his voice carried more worry than authority. He didn't want them getting hurt. Stepping outside, he was immediately hit by the cold sting of rain. The beam of his flashlight cut through the darkness, searching for the source of the shadow. The storm made it nearly impossible to see, but Elias pressed on, his boots sinking into the muddy ground with every step. The closer he got, the clearer it became. It wasn't just an animal, it was a horse, and she was in terrible shape. Elias's heart ached at the sight. "Who could do this?" he muttered under his breath, his voice filled with both anger and sadness. Little did Elias know, this encounter would not only change the horse's fate, but his own as well. Elias's breath caught as his flashlight revealed the horse fully for the first time. She lay crumpled on the wet ground, her chest rising and falling in shallow, uneven breaths. The gash on her side was deep, likely from a fall, or perhaps even human cruelty, and her mud-caked legs bore scratches and swelling that told a story of endless struggle. The storm raged on, as if daring Elias to turn back. But he had already made his decision. Dropping to his knees in the soaked grass, he slowly extended a hand toward the horse. "Hey there, girl," he murmured, his voice soft and steady, cutting through the chaos. "I'm not gonna hurt you. It's okay." The horse flinched at the sound, her eyes wide with terror. She tried to shift away, but her body was too weak. Elias froze, giving her space, letting her see that he wasn't a threat. He waited, the rain pouring down his face, until she stilled again. Minutes passed like hours as Elias assessed her condition. Every movement was calculated, his hands gentle yet firm. He could feel her fear, her mistrust. "You've been through a lot, haven't you?" he whispered, his voice tinged with both sorrow and determination. "But you're not alone anymore. I've got you." Reaching into his coat pocket, Elias pulled out a small cloth and dabbed at the blood near her wound. The horse's body tensed, her muscles trembling with the effort to stay still. "I know it hurts," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "Just hang on a little longer." The rain wasn't letting up, and Elias knew they couldn't stay out here much longer. She wouldn't survive another hour in this storm. Summoning all his strength, he maneuvered a makeshift sling from his coat, looping it around her torso. "We're getting out of here," he told her, though he wasn't sure if it was reassurance for her or for himself. With a heave, Elias began the grueling task of lifting her. She wasn't heavy. Her frail body had long since lost its strength, but the mud and rain made every step treacherous. Elias's boots sank into the earth, as he half-carried, half-dragged her toward the faint light of his barn in the distance. The horse stumbled more than once, her legs buckling under her. Each time, Elias stopped, whispering words of encouragement. "Come on, girl. Just a little further. You can do this." His own body screamed in protest, the cold and weight draining him, but he refused to give up. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they reached the barn. Elias eased her onto a bed of hay, the dry warmth a stark contrast to the storm outside. He wrapped her in an old blanket, his hands trembling as he worked quickly to clean her wounds. "You're safe now," he said softly, stroking her head as her eyes fluttered shut in exhaustion. For the first time that night, Elias felt a flicker of hope. This was only the beginning, but at least now she had a chance. The days following Aurora's rescue were filled with small victories, quiet, tender moments that would shape the healing process. Elias had always been a man of patience, but the journey of restoring life to a horse so broken tested every ounce of his resolve. Still, he had never given up on a creature in need, and this time was no different. Aurora's recovery wasn't just about physical healing. It was about restoring her spirit, shattered by the harshness of the world she had endured. In the beginning, Aurora was little more than a shadow of the majestic creature she once was. Her eyes, wide with fear, watched Elias carefully every time he entered the barn. Her movements were stiff, tentative, as if every step was a painful reminder of her trauma. She stood hunched in the corner of the stall, her coat matted with mud, a stark contrast to the vibrant, lively horse Elias had imagined she could be. Every morning, Elias began his routine with a quiet greeting, speaking to her softly, letting her know she wasn't alone. He would clean her wounds, carefully brushing away the dirt and applying fresh bandages. With every touch, he tried to soothe her. "You're strong, girl. We'll get through this together," he would murmur, even if she didn't seem to hear. At first, Aurora barely ate. The trauma of her abandonment had left her with little appetite, but Elias was patient. He hand-fed her small portions of hay and grain, coaxing her to nibble. It took time, but slowly, her hunger returned. Her once thin frame began to show signs of improvement, and Elias felt a spark of hope. The first real breakthrough came on the 4th day, when Elias found her standing on her own for the first time. It wasn't much, just a few shaky steps, but it was enough to make Elias's heart swell. He stood at the doorway of the barn, watching in awe as Aurora shifted her weight, testing her legs. She looked up at him, her eyes full of uncertainty, but also something else, the faintest glimmer of trust. The days that followed brought more progress, though the journey was far from easy. Aurora's healing was slow, and there were setbacks. One morning, she refused to get up, her legs too weak from the effort. Elias didn't push her. Instead, he sat beside her, rubbing her neck, and waited for her to try again. "Take your time, girl," he whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." Each time she rose, Elias celebrated with a gentle word of praise, no matter how small the step. Soon, Aurora's legs grew stronger, and she began to move around the barn more confidently. She would take a few steps, then pause to rest, but there was no denying the progress. Her coat started to regain its shine, and the exhaustion in her eyes began to fade, replaced by a quiet curiosity. And then, one day, when the sun broke through the clouds after a week of rain, Elias stood at the barn door, watching in awe as Aurora took her first true steps outside. She hesitated for a moment, then lifted her head to the sky, breathing in the fresh air, a sound of peace escaping her. Elias watched, his heart full, knowing that this was just the beginning of their journey together. Aurora wasn't just healing physically. She was beginning to trust again, to believe that there was kindness in the world. And in that moment, Elias knew that he had given her more than a second chance. He had given her a future. As the weeks turned into months, Aurora's transformation was nothing short of miraculous. The once fragile and broken horse that had been left to die in the storm was becoming something else entirely. A symbol of strength, resilience, and renewal. And as she changed, so did Elias. What had begun as a rescue mission had blossomed into an unexpected partnership, one that would forever alter both their lives. At first, Aurora's progress had been slow, like a sapling slowly growing toward the sun. But as time went on, she began to move with more purpose. Her muscles, once wasted and weak, started to gain definition, each stride more fluid and graceful than the last. Her coat, once dull and matted, now gleamed under the sunlight, a beautiful chestnut hue that shimmered with life. The scars from the storm, though still present, had faded, their significance diminished by the new vitality in her spirit. Elias had never been prouder. Each day he spent hours with Aurora, brushing her, feeding her, and speaking to her as though she understood every word. And in a way, she did. The bond between them had grown so deep that it felt as though their hearts beat in sync. Elias had witnessed the healing of her body, but it was her spirit that had undergone the most profound change. Where fear and distrust once ruled her, there was now curiosity and hope. She looked to him for guidance, not with apprehension, but with an open heart. One afternoon, as Elias was brushing Aurora's mane, he noticed something that made his heart swell with emotion. She was no longer the scared, timid horse she had been when he first found her. She was confident, proud even, and her eyes sparkled with intelligence. She had regained the strength to stand tall, but it was more than just physical. She had found her confidence. Elias took her to the nearby fields where the open space stretched out before them. For a moment, Aurora hesitated, as if unsure of what to do with the freedom around her. Then, with a sudden burst of energy, she broke into a graceful gallop, her hooves kicking up the earth beneath her. Elias stood in awe, watching her run with abandon, the wind in her mane, the joy in her movements undeniable. She had become the horse she was always meant to be. Over time, Aurora's transformation continued. She became stronger, more agile, and more graceful than Elias had ever imagined. She learned to trust again, to allow people into her world, but it was Elias who held the deepest place in her heart. Together, they began to train, first with simple exercises, then with more complex maneuvers. Aurora showed an innate talent for jumping, her movements light and fluid, as though the very act of flying over obstacles brought her joy. The once broken horse that had been left to die was now a champion in the making, and Elias knew that their journey together was far from over. As the days went by, it became clear that Aurora's transformation wasn't just about healing her wounds, it was about embracing the future with strength and courage. In the quiet moments, when Elias stood at the fence, watching Aurora graze in the field, he couldn't help but marvel at the beauty of their bond. She had healed, not just for herself, but for him as well. Together, they had found something that neither of them had been searching for: hope. And with that hope came the belief that anything was possible. When Aurora's transformation became evident to those in the small town, the reaction was one of sheer amazement. What had started as a quiet rescue had quickly become the talk of the town, drawing attention from neighbors, friends, and even strangers who had heard the incredible story of the injured horse and the kind man who had saved her. Elias, though a man of few words, could not help but feel the warmth of their admiration. He had never sought recognition for his actions. His reward was always in the quiet satisfaction of knowing he had done what was right. But what came next was far more than he had ever expected. It began with a few people stopping by his farm, drawn by the rumors of Aurora's miraculous recovery. At first, they came out of curiosity, whispering to one another as they peered over the fence, eager to see the once-broken horse for themselves. But, as they watched Aurora move across the field, her hooves light and swift, their skepticism turned into awe. "She looks like a completely different horse," one neighbor, Mrs. Finch, said in astonishment. "You've worked a miracle, Elias." Elias nodded silently, though a small, proud smile tugged at the corner of his lips. He didn't need to speak. The bond he shared with Aurora said it all. Soon, more and more townsfolk came to visit. Some brought carrots and apples, offering them to Aurora as though she were a local celebrity. Children gathered around the fence, eyes wide with wonder, eager to witness the strength of a horse that had once seemed so fragile. They were fascinated by her story, captivated by the idea that a creature could come back from the brink of death, not just to survive, but to thrive. Word of Aurora's progress spread beyond the town, reaching local newspapers and even a few animal rescue organizations. They were all eager to document the story of the horse who had defied the odds and the man who had devoted himself to bringing her back to life. Elias found himself, albeit reluctantly, at the center of attention as reporters came to interview him and capture the bond he shared with Aurora on film. He preferred the quiet life, but there was no denying the impact their story had on people. The town's reaction wasn't just limited to admiration. Many felt a renewed sense of pride and hope in the community. Elias's act of kindness had inspired others to think about the animals they cared for in a new light. Several neighbors began volunteering at local shelters, helping animals in need, while others started donating to rescue organizations. Aurora's story had ignited something within them, something that reminded everyone of the power of compassion and the importance of kindness, especially toward those who cannot speak for themselves. For Elias, though, the greatest change came from the children. Every afternoon, he would find them sitting by the fence, eagerly watching Aurora as she pranced and galloped in the field. Some of them began to visit regularly, eager to learn how to care for horses. Elias, though not a teacher by nature, found himself sharing his knowledge, showing them how to groom and tend to the horses, how to understand their needs. They were fascinated by Aurora's grace and strength, and Elias could see how much they admired the horse, not just for her beauty, but for her incredible journey. In many ways, the town had become part of their healing. Aurora's recovery was no longer just Elias's journey. It had become the story of the entire community, a testament to the healing power of love, patience, and dedication. The community had witnessed a miracle, but, more importantly, they had witnessed the heart of what it meant to care for others, whether human or animal. And in that, they found their own redemption. The moment that defined both Aurora's and Elias's journey arrived sooner than they could have imagined, a defining challenge that would test their bond, their courage, and their resolve. It came one crisp autumn afternoon, when the town was buzzing with excitement about the upcoming regional equestrian competition. The local fairgrounds were hosting the event, a place where riders and horses from all over the county gathered to show off their skills. It was a chance for local riders to shine, and for Aurora, it would be the ultimate test. Elias had never planned for Aurora to compete. In fact, the idea of entering her into such a high-stakes event had never crossed his mind. His focus had always been on healing her, rebuilding her strength, and showing her the world again. But as the day of the competition drew closer, something began to shift. Aurora, whose movements had grown increasingly graceful and confident, seemed eager for a challenge. Elias noticed it in the way she lifted her head, the way her eyes sparkled when she was allowed to run free in the open fields. She had become more than just a survivor. She had become a champion in her own right. But Elias knew that taking her to the competition meant pushing both of them beyond their comfort zones, into the unknown. The decision wasn't made lightly. Elias struggled with doubts. What if Aurora wasn't ready? What if the pressure was too much for her? He thought back to the early days when she could barely stand, and he questioned whether it was fair to push her to compete so soon. But as he stood beside her one evening, brushing her coat under the fading light of the sun, he knew that this was part of her healing. She had always been a fighter, and now, more than ever, she needed to show the world just how far she had come. On the day of the competition, the tension was palpable. Elias could feel the weight of every eye on them as they entered the ring. The crowd had gathered, eager to witness the remarkable story of the horse who had been abandoned and left to die, only to rise from the ashes. The sight of Aurora, standing tall and proud next to Elias, was already a triumph. But the real test lay ahead. As the starting bell rang, Aurora and Elias took their place in the arena. The crowd fell silent. The course before them was full of obstacles, jumps, narrow passages, and tight turns. For any horse, this would have been a challenge. For Aurora, it was a test of everything she had learned and everything she had become. Elias gave a small nod of encouragement. He had learned to trust her instincts, just as she had learned to trust his guidance. With a deep breath, he urged her forward, and in that instant Aurora took off, her hooves pounding the earth in rhythmic harmony. Each jump was a fluid motion, each turn sharp and graceful, as if they were one, moving as if they had been training for this very moment all their lives. The crowd gasped in awe. The horse that had once been broken, struggling to take a single step, was now soaring through the course like a champion. The final jump came into view, the tallest and most difficult of them all. And for a brief second, Elias's heart stopped. Could they make it? Without hesitation, Aurora stretched her legs, soaring over the obstacle with grace, landing effortlessly on the other side. The crowd erupted in cheers, but for Elias, the world seemed to slow down. In that moment, time stood still, and all that mattered was the bond between him and the horse who had taught him the true meaning of strength. As they crossed the finish line, the roar of the crowd reached a deafening crescendo. They had done it. Aurora had done it. They had proven that no matter how broken one might be, with patience, love, and a belief in the impossible, anything could be overcome. As the crowd's applause echoed around the arena, Elias stood quietly beside Aurora, his hand resting gently on her neck. The noise of the cheering spectators seemed distant now, as if the world had faded into the background. All that remained was him and the horse, who had come to mean more to him than he could ever express. The bond they shared was something that could not be captured in words, but in the depth of every glance, every touch, every moment of understanding between them. As they stood there, Aurora's chest heaving slightly from the exertion, Elias's mind drifted back to the first day he had found her. He remembered the fear in her eyes, the hesitation in her steps, the way she had looked at him as though she couldn't believe she was worthy of kindness. How far she had come. How far they had both come. This moment, this victory, wasn't just about the competition or the medals or the applause. It was about the journey they had taken together. It was about healing, about learning to trust again, about rediscovering joy in the simplest of things. It was about the strength to overcome, not just for oneself, but for someone else. Aurora had transformed from a broken, abandoned creature into a champion, not just in the arena, but in the way she had taught Elias to never give up, to never lose hope, no matter how dark the road seemed. The crowd slowly began to disperse, their cheers fading into the distance. But Elias remained standing beside Aurora, taking in the quiet beauty of the moment. He stroked her mane, his fingers gently threading through the soft strands as tears welled up in his eyes. For a moment, he couldn't hold them back. They weren't tears of sadness, but of overwhelming gratitude. Gratitude for the journey they had shared, for the lessons they had learned, for the unspoken bond between them. He had saved her, yes, but in so many ways, she had saved him too. Aurora had reminded him of what it meant to be patient, to believe in the impossible, and to never give up, even when it seemed like all was lost. He leaned in, pressing his forehead gently against hers, the coolness of her skin grounding him in the present moment. "We did it," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "We really did it, girl." For a brief moment, it felt as if the world had stopped turning, as if nothing else mattered but the two of them standing in that arena, man and horse, not as savior and rescued, but as equals, as partners. The crowd had seen their victory, but only Elias truly understood the significance of this day. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, Elias led Aurora back to the stable, their steps slow and deliberate. It was not the end of their journey, but the beginning of something even greater. Together, they had proven that no matter how broken or beaten down one might feel, with love, patience, and unwavering belief in one another, there was always a chance for a new beginning. And as they disappeared into the quiet of the evening, their hearts were full of hope, full of love, and full of the certainty that the best was yet to come. As the story of Aurora and Elias comes to a close, we're reminded of the incredible power of second chances and the strength that lies in the bond between humans and animals. Their journey wasn't just about a horse recovering from the brink of death. It was about resilience, love, and the unwavering belief that no matter how difficult the road may seem, there is always hope for a brighter tomorrow. If you've been touched by this story, remember that the power to make a difference is in your hands. Whether it's rescuing an animal in need, offering a kind word to someone who's struggling, or simply taking the time to believe in someone's potential, even when they can't see it for themselves, you have the ability to change lives. Aurora's transformation wasn't just a victory for her and Elias. It's a reminder that each of us has the capacity for greatness, even in the face of adversity. There are countless animals, just like Aurora, who need someone to believe in them. Whether it's through adoption, volunteering at shelters, or supporting animal rescue organizations, you can be part of their journey too. Every act of kindness, no matter how small, makes a difference. If this story moved you, we encourage you to take action. Look for local shelters or rescues that are looking for volunteers. If you're considering adopting a pet, think of all the lives you can change by offering a loving home to one of these deserving animals. And don't forget, this story is just one of many. And there are more heroes like Elias and Aurora out there waiting for their stories to be told. If you've experienced a heartwarming story of your own, whether it's about an animal, a loved one, or someone who made a difference in your life, share it with others. Inspire others to take action. to believe in the impossible, and to stand strong in the face of challenges. Together, we can make this world a kinder, more compassionate place, one story at a time. So, share this video, spread the word, and leave a comment telling us how you've been inspired by Aurora's journey. Have you ever experienced a moment of transformation, whether with a pet, a person, or even in your own life? We'd love to hear your stories. Remember, the power of change starts with us. Whether big or small, every effort counts. Just like Aurora and Elias, we all have the ability to rise above our circumstances and create a better tomorrow, for ourselves and for those around us. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more heartwarming stories that remind us all of the incredible strength that exists in the world when we come together with love, compassion, and hope.